Thank you so much for that great introduction, and thank you all for being here. I feel like you saw this fabulous video, and maybe we could just go right to the dessert reception. I'm very, very honored to be here as the first speaker in this Dr. Bruce J. Nelson Distinguished Speakers Series, Rising to the Challenge, in honor of the International Year of Chemistry. When I look back over the list of very distinguished people who have been in this series in the past, I really feel very privileged. I feel equally privileged to have spent the day here at Harvey Mudd College. This is not my first visit to this overall campus of colleges, but it's my first visit to Harvey Mudd. How many of you in this audience are actually enrolled at Harvey Mudd? Wow, most of you. Okay, so, thank you for being here. I have been incredibly impressed with what I've seen today, and talking with the students and the professors has just been an exhilarating experience for me. For those of you who are not familiar with the International Year of Chemistry, you should be now. This is a United Nations designated International Year of Chemistry, and unfortunately the United States is one of the only countries that did not issue a stamp. We were very disappointed. We had a petition with thousands and thousands of names that we sent to the Postal Service, and they said, no, we're going to put Elvis on the stamp instead. This gives you a sense of the challenges that we have to face as that video from Dow Chemical showed, that people don't really fully appreciate what chemistry does for daily life. But when we got this International Year of Chemistry designation, we were excited because the goals are to increase public appreciation of chemistry in meeting world needs, which of course is kind of the theme of this series. We want to increase the interest in chemistry among young people, generate enthusiasm for the creative future of chemistry, and also acknowledge women in chemistry. This is the 100th anniversary of Marie Curie's second Nobel Prize. So the American Chemical Society has taken a very strong lead, as you saw from some of the video, in celebrating this. We have an entire website. We decided not to actually appropriate money and take ads, but rather to mobilize our 163,000 members to be ambassadors for chemistry, to go out into their communities, into their book clubs, and into their schools, and talk about chemistry. And here's an example of the kind of thing we asked them to do. So I was in Whole Foods a couple of weeks ago, and it was a Saturday morning, and there was a guy promoting a new cereal. And he was holding up this box of cereal, and he said to a customer who's walking by, "There are no chemicals in this cereal." And I was in my gym clothes, and I was going by, and I turned around, I wheeled around, I waited till the customer left, and I went up to him and I said, I'm a chemist. And not only are there chemicals in that cereal, there are chemicals in everything in this store. And he really looked at me with a great deal of shock. And so I had to give him a little chemistry lesson right there on the spot. But that's what we're asking people to do. We're asking them to, not use chemicals as if it were a toxic substance, right? Because we all are made of chemicals, and we really need to take that message out into the world. But there are a lot of things that we're doing, and I could spend my whole talk tonight talking about it, but I won't. I'm just going to tell you about a couple of things that we're doing at the American Chemical Society to celebrate the International Year of Chemistry. One is every day on our website, which is a very simple website, acs.org. We have something called 365 Chemistry for Life, and every day we feature something having to do with chemistry. These were ideas that were submitted by our members, and some of them are National Historic Chemical Landmarks. And today, October 6th, we're celebrating the first plant, the first coal facility in Kingsport, Tennessee, that was owned by Eastman, that used coal rather than petroleum to produce chemicals for plastics. And it began operating in 1983. And it's a National Historic Chemical Landmark. And you can go on the site every day and learn some new factoid about a person or a process or a milestone. The second thing we're pretty pleased about is that the National Science Foundation gave us $1 million just a month ago to take kits for chemistry to middle school teachers all over the United States, hands-on chemistry experiments. So we'll be distributing about 10,000 of those in the next year. And part of the grant is also to go to science festivals in places like San Diego this weekend, in Indianapolis, and in the Bay Area on the West Coast, and also in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and do hands-on chemistry. And we had one of these festivals last year. We had about 250,000 people on the National Mall in Washington coming to learn about chemistry. So we're going to be doing that with this $1 million from the National Science Foundation. And the third is the International Year of Chemistry Worldwide Global Water Experiments. And these are experiments being done by young people all over the world, different types of measurements, and then they're going to be posting them on a website, and this is going to be at all grade levels. So this is pretty nifty. And then because Dow Chemical was mentioned, I wanted to say that the Dow Chemical Company, as part of their International Year of Chemistry celebration, just awarded to the American Chemical Society $2.5 million to bring the International Chemistry Olympiad to the United States next year. And they are going to be the sole sponsor, and ACS is the host country. So we're very excited about that. You've already learned, if you paid attention, to the fact that on September 26th, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, passed a resolution unanimously. I think there were 2 people in the chamber, designating the 2011 as the International Year of Chemistry. We thought, considering that the Senate has trouble getting anything done at all, this was a huge accomplishment. But the International Year of Chemistry sets the stage for my talk, which is actually called From Sputnik to Gene Splicing, Attracting the Best and Brightest into Science, and I will add the word engineering because we're here at Harvey Mudd. Because it recognizes the importance of chemistry in meeting world needs. And this is really what the theme of this series is about. And you're going to hear from some people who are going to probably give a much more technical talk tonight. But tonight I'm going to talk a little more philosophically about why it is so important to attract the best and the brightest into science and engineering. And I've got the best and the brightest already sitting in this room. So if you want to go to sleep and wake up at dessert time, I'll understand. Today I was at Harvey Mudd, and I met a number of professors and students doing research. And here are some of the things that they're studying. These are the kinds of challenges that we have. So they're studying air pollution. They're studying basic research that will lead to treatments for HIV/AIDS. They're studying molecules that have special properties to kill bacteria. All of these are amazing research projects that will improve the way we live. The American Chemical Society's vision statement is improving people's lives through the transforming power of chemistry. It took us a long time, 18 months, to come up with this vision statement because we wanted each word to really be meaningful. But this is what chemistry does and what it is going to do. If there is a single challenge in the world that doesn't involve chemistry, I cannot tell you what it is. Whether it is meeting the need for more energy, for clean water, for health issues, for national security, for the cleaning up the environment, for coming up with new materials, chemists and chemical engineers are going to be part of solving those challenges. And that's the message that the International Year of Chemistry is really all about. It is about making sure that not just the people in this room who actually already understand all these things, but that everybody understands this. And it's important that they understand it. And as you saw a fact up there, chemistry is really an important driver of our economy. It employs a lot of people, and it is the source of great innovation. 1 in 5 patents is a chemical patent, and the number of new molecules that are being invented every year and being disclosed in patents is an astonishing number. My talk this evening is focused on this theme, that we need more chemists, chemical engineers, and other scientists to help solve these problems. And in fact, what I want to tell you, for those of you who have really decided that this is your major and this is what you're going to do, you are embarking on what I consider to be a noble calling. And I'm going to tell you why I think it is such a noble calling. But you're the exception here at Harvey Mudd College. We are having problems attracting the best and the brightest into science and engineering. And although some of you may not become scientists and engineers, certainly the studying that you're doing here at Harvey Mudd will serve you well, because there's nothing that goes on in the world today that doesn't involve an understanding. And the next time you're in Whole Foods and you hear people talking about there are no chemicals in the food, you can take care of that, even if you've only just had a couple courses in chemistry. But I am very concerned that about this lack of interest in science. It seems now in this country at a very young age. And I'm concerned that the passion, quality, and rigor that have long characterized science and technology in the U.S. are fading. So to be very blunt and to be a little depressing, the United States faces an extremely strong challenge today in its preeminence in science and technology. This is a preeminence that developed after World War II and really reached its peak in the 1980s and 1990s and is under grave threat today. Now, the President of the United States has spoken eloquently about this. He has recognized this challenge. It has been recognized by many people. But to be quite frank, the challenges are huge. To be blunt, the state of education in this country today at the elementary, secondary school level is abysmal. Now, most of you are not the products of abysmal education. You're the elite. But if you travel around this country and if you read the newspapers or you watch television, you know that we are failing young people in science education today. And I would even say that it goes beyond science education. Overall, our test scores compared to the rest of the world are really, really bad, and it's embarrassing. We can still claim superiority at our higher education. We have still the best colleges and universities in the world. For decades, the best and the brightest from other countries came to study at the United States colleges in engineering. And they stayed. They got their degrees, they got their PhDs, and they stayed. And we really thrived. Many of the people who work in some of the most successful industries here today, whether it's the computer industry, whether it is the pharmaceutical industry, actually came to the United States to study for their PhD and decided not to go back. That is not true today. Today, the United States faces in higher education an enormous challenge from other universities all over the world, not just in China, where China has recognized that science and technology is the answer to all of their problems, really. They are pouring billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars into creating the best laboratories. And they are luring the scientists who have spent up to 20, 25 years in the United States contributing to our economy back to China. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've seen the laboratories. They're astonishing. India. When India achieved independence in 1947, it was recognized that science and technology would be the way they would move forward from being under the subject of British rule. And they began establishing science and technology institutes. And although it has taken them a while to catch up, they are doing pretty much what China has been doing, which is pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars into creating excellent universities. You're also seeing this happen now in places like Korea. It's been long true in Japan, but Korea is luring a lot of U.S. scientists to Korea to spend at least part of their year in the university system there. Now, these are all good things for the world. Don't get me wrong. I think that everyone should have the opportunity to have the kind of standard of living that we have here in the United States. But I don't want the United States to become a third world country. And so our preeminence in science and technology, which has driven this country to great heights and has enabled all of us to enjoy an incredible standard of living, is really under threat. So In the U.S., we have this really, really serious issue and this problem. And sometimes people say to me, well, why should we care about attracting the best and the brightest to science? And so one of the quotes that I like to use is from the great mathematician and philosopher Bertrand Russell, who wrote in the mid-20th century, almost everything that distinguishes the modern world from earlier centuries is attributable to science. And that is what I've just said, that the standard of living we enjoy today and that we hope to extend to people all over the world is due to the advances in science and technology. So, as someone who was educated as a chemist, I am delighted to be here talking to people who already know all of this. It is really sometimes hard to go before an audience where they don't have a clue of what I'm talking about. So we're at a crossroads in this country, and what I've wondered is why and how did we get here? How is it that so many people who at one time, people of my generation, I know I'm old compared to most of you, but I don't feel old, but how is it that we are having so much trouble doing this? So I'm going to give you a little historical perspective, and some of you who attended my seminar today have heard a little bit of this, but I am a member of the baby boom generation. I was born the first year of the baby boom, 1946, right after the war. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. in an extended family. I grew up actually in my grandmother's home with my mother and father and a brother and an uncle. And why did we live with my grandmother? Well, my father was a classical musician. He was a bassoonist. In fact, he was from a family of bassoonists. Picture that. His grandfather came over to the United States from Russia, and he was a violinist, and there were no jobs for violinists, so he taught himself the bassoon. And he got a good job in a great orchestra, so then he taught his 4 sons the bassoon. And they all got great jobs in orchestras all over the United States. And my grandfather played with Toscanini and the New York Philharmonic. And then along came my dad, and you know, my father wanted to be a bassoonist, and he had some amazing stories. So he became a classical bassoonist, and but it was hard to make a living. So we lived with my grandmother, and there was no interest in science in our household. There was a lot of interest in music, as you can imagine. And my mother at the time was what we called a housewife. She later became the executive assistant to the head of what was then a very small insurance company now known as Geico. There were no geckos in those days. So I didn't have a chemistry set, but you know what I had was a television program. It was called Watch Mr. Wizard. And it was on television weekly live from 1951 to 1965. And it was a really fun show. And that was my first exposure to science. So Mr. Wizard was actually a World War II pilot named Don Herbert. And he had also become a radio announcer. And the early days of television, this was live television, black and white. He would do experiments using everyday objects. So instead of a flask or a beaker, he would use a milk bottle. And you learned principles about everything, how a plane flies and why water boils and you know, just all kinds of things. And he had kids around him who were supposed to be neighborhood kids. And my goal at that time when I was about 6 years old was to get onto the Mr. Wizard show. But I never knew that these were actually paid actors. So it was very disappointing when I learned that I would never be on Mr. Wizard. But you know, sometimes things went wrong, and then Mr. Wizard would have to repeat them the following week. And when something went right, when an experiment worked, all the kids would say in unison, "Gee, Mr. Wizard." And the great thing was Mr. Wizard made science very accessible. And you really could see that it had something to do with your everyday life. I mean, as a little kid, I started seeing molecules in tabletops, you know. It's like, it wasn't just a tabletop. I mean, there were molecules in there. This is pretty exciting to me. I know lots of people who became interested in science from watching Mr. Wizard. And if you're interested, you can still see it on the internet. Just type in Watch Mr. Wizard and you can see why it was so much fun. So with the help of Mr. Wizard, I became very aware, as a lot of my friends did, of why science was important. And then DuPont Company had a great slogan, better things for better living through chemistry. And so, it's okay, I understand this. And so from a very young age, I wanted to be a chemist. I wanted to invent drugs that would cure cancer. And I understood that it was chemists, not medical doctors, that did that. And so, I knew from the age of about 10 that I wanted to be a scientist. And then Sputnik was launched. Everybody knows what Sputnik is, and it's the same year that Harvey Mudd College opened its doors, in 1957. And the United States became very worried that the Soviet Union was going to really put us out of business as a country. And so the federal government began pouring lots of money into science and engineering education. And many teachers received grants to become teachers, high school teachers. So when I went to school in the 50s and the 60s, I had teachers who really knew their subject. I had people who taught me chemistry who really knew chemistry. They weren't phys ed teachers who were teaching chemistry on the side. They were math teachers who truly knew math. And so my generation and those who followed me for another 20 years benefited from what the government invested, what the United States government invested in teachers and in science and education. And I will tell you that we were told that being a scientist or an engineer was a noble calling. We really were told that. Scientists were widely respected, and they earned a respectable salary. And the message to young people was this: you can do great things for your country, for humankind, and you do not have to take a vow of poverty to do that. You will, in fact, make a living. And, of course, as getting a degree in chemistry, in general, in those days, your tuition was completely paid for and you received a stipend. So you didn't graduate with debt. You really were, as a graduate student getting a PhD, you really did not graduate with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt like medical students do today, or lawyers for that matter. So we heeded this call, this noble call, in droves. And so we have lots and lots of people of my age who are scientists and engineers. Lots. It was the Sputnik boom. And we're still producing a lot of science and engineering majors. The problem is that other countries are producing more. For example, the number of PhDs in the physical and biological sciences grew more than 1,000% in China between 1985 and 2003 compared to 20% in the United States. So why haven't more people chosen science and engineering as a profession? So I think there are reasons. If we look back and we look at the image of science and technology, when we launched rockets, that was really great. But, even right around the time of World War II, we have so many wars now going on, I have to be very explicit. When the atomic bomb was dropped, that was the first time people started to say, maybe this science and technology isn't all so great. It ended a war. That was good. But it really made people nervous. I learned today that Harvey Mudd has these secret basement rooms, right? That were, in case that there was a nuclear bomb, you could still keep learning about science and technology. I don't really know if this is true, but this is what I was told. When I was growing up, we just hid under our desks. That was, we would have these air raid drills, and I was like 10 years old, and I thought, wait a minute. I know what a nuclear bomb can do. Do they really think hiding under my desk is going to save me? It was a very scary time. But anyway, in the 60s, the reputation of science and technology really started to go downhill, and especially chemistry, because around that time, Rachel Carson, whom I'm sure you all know, wrote her very famous book, Silent Spring. And all of a sudden, these wonderful chemicals, these pesticides that had actually wiped out malaria, were being called into question. because they were thinning the shells of eggs that birds were laying, and they were killing off bird life in America. And from there, it was pretty much all downhill. There was a whole series of events that really reinforced the perception that science in general and chemistry in particular were no longer the keys to a better future. They were no longer better things for better living through chemistry. Chemistry, it seemed, had run amok. Chemicals were killing our birds. They were poisoning our rivers, our air, threatening our very existence. Then along came the Vietnam War, and there was napalm and Agent Orange. There were rivers on fire from industrial waste in the Midwest. The smog over Los Angeles, well, we still know about the smog over Los Angeles. There are scientists here at Harvey Mudd who are actually studying that smog. There was the Bhopal disaster in India in 1984 that killed thousands of people. I mean, the evidence kept building that there was a problem with science and technology. And these past decades have created a very negative perception for many people in the public. Just as I said, you walk into Whole Foods and you hear people talking about chemicals as being, that it's not the word just chemicals. It's as if the word, it's toxic chemicals, right? There's no such thing as a good chemical. It's just a toxic chemical. So this is where we've come to. We've come to the fact that the public it does not understand anymore the good things that chemistry can do, and especially that that our profession, those of us who are chemists, can do. And it's kind of sad for me to look back over these years and see how this has gone from chemistry could really provide a better life to chemicals are going to harm us. So I think that this perception, why would you want to become a scientist? Why would you want to become a chemist with that perception? The other thing I would say about science and engineering is the perception that happens to be true that it's hard. Okay, so I know professors try to make science fun. But in fact, you know what? It's hard work. It's hard work. Learning about these basic principles, studying math and engineering, it's always been something that has required hard work to really excel at. And so it is not surprising that only the best and the brightest would want to study science and engineering. One of my favorite things to tell people is that there is a lot left to do. All of the challenges that we talked about at the beginning and that you saw up here, there is a lot left to do. And I challenge you to think about how you're going to solve these things, how you're going to contribute. A number of years ago, a president of the American Chemical Society, Ronald Breslow, who's at Columbia University, wrote a book called Chemistry Today and Tomorrow, The Central, Useful, and Creative Science. And I love this book because in the book, he talked about all the things that are left to solve. And these challenges are often related to chemistry at the interface of other fields, of biology and astronomy and electronics and medicine and physics. So that these challenges are not just, in narrow fields of chemistry, but chemistry as it relates to all these other areas. As I said early in my talk, about energy, about the environment, about new materials, about all of the health problems. And one of the most exciting areas is medicinal chemistry. I mean, many people have been very excited about, the sequencing of the genome and providing personalized medicine. And that is very, very important, but it's not going to lead to the cure to all diseases. And one of the most important problems that we have is an antibiotic resistance. And this is something that chemists are working on, how to develop new drugs that will be able to kill bacteria that have developed resistance to ordinary antibiotics. And this is a very, very serious problem all over the world. There are viral diseases as such as AIDS that are extremely difficult, that are not curable at the current time. And, but they might be someday, and chemists are going to play a very large role in that. There are dozens of other examples, but the real thing I want to say is that if you want people to get excited about chemistry, it's not about telling them about all the things that chemists have already done, but all the things that are left to do. That's the real key here, is that there is so much that chemistry still can do to make the world a better place. So what can we do? What can we do to attract the best and the brightest? Well, I think to some extent that there has to be a return to this feeling of the pre-Sputnik era. And, you hear a lot said about, this is our Sputnik moment, we need to do this, we need to do that. But really, for those of us who grew up in the pre-Sputnik era, we need to get back to that sense that science and engineering, those professions are noble callings that are going to do good things for humanity. Some of us in this room remember the dotcom boom of 2000. A lot of our best and the brightest had gone to work for computer companies, and all of a sudden they were making millions of dollars, and we had lots of 20-somethings who were millionaires and billionaires. And then there was the dot-com bust. But those were some of our best and brightest who decided that money was more important than doing good. And then there were a lot of our best and brightest who went to Wall Street. And they were making millions and millions of dollars, making more money than you could possibly imagine. And then we had the meltdown in 2008 that practically threw the entire world into a global recession. I wonder if they look back over their careers in 40 years, what they're going to think about what they did. I hope that those of you who are in your 20s now and maybe you're 20 or 19, I hope you'll think about what your career is going to be and what you'll think about 40 years from now. Did you do something that was worthwhile? Did you do something that made a difference in life, or did you just make a lot of money? Now, as I said before, you can be a scientist and still make a lot of money. There's nothing that says you can't. You could do something fantastic, start a company, and become a millionaire. And then you could become a philanthropist, and you could help people in many other ways. So, but I really urge people, young people starting out on their careers, to think about when they look back, what's going to be meaningful to them? What did they do that made a difference in the world? And it's about the passion that you feel for what you're doing and how it can help people. That's what the International Year of Chemistry is really all about. And that's what being a scientist is really all about. It's about helping people. And that's the end goal of everything that you do. It's about improving the world. So I think there are some very specific things that people can do. And I think that one of them is to really ensure that when you talk to other young people, that you talk about what you're majoring in, and you make it very clear that there's something exciting going on, especially young children. Some of you probably have younger brothers and sisters, or maybe you have nieces and nephews, and really encourage them, because by the time they get to high school, it's too late. If they haven't developed that spark of creativity and of interest when they're young, they're probably not going to get it by the time they get to high school. So there's a very personal thing here. You need to be ambassadors. And then I think also those of you who are eligible to vote, old enough to vote, you need to vote, and you need to tell your legislators why it's important at the state and local levels as well as at the federal level. You need to tell them why it's important to support science and technology and math education. It's abysmal in this country right now. Not in the high schools that you came from, but overall it is abysmal, and it's embarrassing, and this has got to stop. You really have to become an activist in this way. For those of you who are eligible to vote and you don't vote, shame on you. You should be voting, and you should be writing to your legislators, and you should be telling them how important it is. Now, the American Chemical Society is also, there's a few things that you can do. The American Chemical Society, this is my commercial plug, is also doing things. I've told you about the Chemistry Ambassadors program. Now I make it my motto that every Saturday morning I'm in Whole Foods. I'm the Whole Foods chemist. I'm walking around making sure that none of the people who are hawking their products are saying things like there are no chemicals in the cereal. But we also hold briefings for staff members on Capitol Hill to give them the scientific background that they need to help make decisions, because 3/4 of the legislation that's before Congress involves something having to do with science and technology. And we have just a handful of scientists in Congress. We have a couple of chemists and a couple of engineers and a couple of doctors. But by and large, they're making decisions on how to regulate air pollution and what to do with, hazardous waste, and they have no idea what they're voting for. So we hold these briefings and we try to bring in people who will help them understand. And we also give scholarships. We give scholarships to high school students from disadvantaged backgrounds to have a summer research experience. It's called Project Seed. We've been doing it since 1968. We have about 10,000 kids who have been turned on to science because they got this opportunity to work in a lab and get paid for it. Get paid for it more than they would get paid for working in McDonald's. We have a scholarship program for gifted minority students. And we have produced over 100 PhDs from this program. It's only 15 years old, and it was a college-level scholarship, but we have 100 PhDs, people from the African American community, the Latino community, and the Native American community that probably would never have majored in science. We have a scholarship program to produce better high school teachers. And we're really proud of this. This was a gift. This was a philanthropic gift from the Hawk Scientific Foundation of over $30 million. It's now an endowment that's grown to $40 million. So we're producing better trained high school chemistry teachers. We're working on innovation, ways to create jobs. And we've also, of course, the American Chemical Society is deeply involved in generating new chemistry knowledge. So these are some of the things that we're doing. So I guess in closing, because I really want to take questions, I do believe that those of you who are committed to this career pathway, bravo. I think you have a great and bright future ahead of you. I mean, this country needs you. And so, it is kind of your patriotic duty to continue down this pathway. And you will have a rewarding career. You will do something important. You will be able to look back. And now I know it sounds crazy to say 40 years from now, but I was your age once. And hard to believe, I'm sure. But I never thought that far ahead. I knew I wanted to be a chemist, and I was highly motivated. But today there's a lot of competing things, and there's a lot of temptations to go in a different pathway. But, the United States needs your talents. It really does. It needs the best and the brightest that are in this room to improve the human condition. And that really is the most important thing you can do. You may never actually save a life by being, a great brain surgeon. And that's a wonderful gift, people who can do that. But you can save lives in other ways through some of the things that you would be doing as chemists and engineers and scientists and engineers. I don't want to leave out people other than chemists. So I applaud you for taking this hard path, but I assure you that the rewards that lie ahead are just phenomenal, and you will never regret a day in your life that you became a scientist or an engineer. So thank you very, very much for your time, and I guess I will take some questions.
Stay here.